Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stories That Shape Us podcast. My name is Joanna Daniel. If you're new here, you may not have seen this face before. Today, our guest is Natalya Harris. Natalya is a counselor, she's a mom of some beautiful children. They are fun, and she's also the founder of Christ Therapy. Today, Natalya and I are talking about an important subject, the impact of the absent father. Natalya shared in our conference that we held in May, and it was such an impacting presentation, and many people there could relate to what we were her presentation. And so she has graciously agreed to come and talk with us today about the impact of the absent father. Welcome, Natalya.
Hello, Joanna. Hello, listeners.
Welcome. So, is there anything you want to tell the people about yourself before we start?
Um, I'm grateful for this opportunity. Any opportunity I can get to relate with people and share my story, it's always a privilege. I'm going to be honest with you, Joanna. I've had to kind of prepare myself for this one. I feel like it's been a long time coming, but I feel as though the more and more I keep talking about it, having the absent father and the impact that it's had on me, it's it feels very like it's empowering. It feels like it's bringing healing in some way. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you. I'm sure it's bringing healing. You know, so many people could relate when you shared on the conference. So many people could relate to your story and what you shared. So I'm glad it's been healing for you as you bravely started to talk about something that sometimes there are people who wouldn't talk about their experience. So tell us about your personal experience of having an absent father. What was that like for you?
So from a very young age, my dad was never there. I was always told that he left when I was 1 years old, and there wasn't a really good reason for why he left. Like him and my mum wasn't on good terms, and he threatened to leave, and she said, "You can go. That's fine." And he said, "Well, if I go, I'm not going to have anything to do with Natalya, with me." And she said, "Well, if you do that, then that will be your loss." So as a child, I've just been told that it was his loss. It was his loss, and I've just had to kind of just accept that for what it is. But as I got older, it's brought on a lot of other emotions and a lot of questions and a lot of unsettling feelings, and it just made me determined from a young child that I was not going to have children until I get married, for one, and until I meet someone who I believe really values being a father and being there for his children. So in this whole mess, in this whole sadness of my own reality, not having a dad, um, it really has helped me to pick wisely with the father of my children.
So it made you make conscious decisions about life and about relationships and about parenting, just not having him there may help you to do that. And you know, it influences people decision making, but for you it was conscious decision making. And sometimes it's unconscious decision making where people make decisions with men who couldn't father like their father, you know, but you consciously chose somebody that you knew would be able to parent. You said your mom said if you left it, it's your loss, and it is. But I know that it's small comfort when you are going through a tough time and you wonder about the what ifs. You talk about difficult emotions. What were some of those difficult emotions that you experienced?
So some of the difficult emotions were just feeling like I'm not enough. So wondering what was wrong with me. So sometimes I'll be honest with you, because I know I can be honest here, right, Joanna?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And
Honestly,
I know it's safe here as well.
it
So
is.
I'm just gonna just be absolutely raw. So another big part of this, which has been quite hurtful as I've been growing up, is with my dad. He was a mixed race man. And a part of me used to think, is it because I'm too black as a child? Is it because I don't look like him? Is it because I look more like my mum? Is that the reason? It's like I'd come to the conclusion myself or try and make sense of it because it just didn't make any sense. Even at one point, I even said to mum, I said, Mum, did he abuse me as a child? Like, why is this man so terrified of having a relationship with me? Like, what is it? It brought so much confusion, so much like anger, um, not a lot of self worth. It made me question my identity. I'd wish that maybe I looked different when I was younger. It just, it was sad. And another part of this, my siblings, they had a different dad to me, and their dads were present for them. So at the weekend, they'd go to their dads, and then I'd be at home, or I might go and visit one of my aunties instead. But as a child, it wasn't nice, and I would hate for any child to have to experience that.
I bet. I can't imagine what that was like. And I don't understand a man or a woman who would leave a spouse, leave their partner, and also leave the child. It just doesn't make sense to me. But people do it. People do it. And here you are saying, as a child, when you don't have enough information, we fill the gaps, don't we? And you fill the gaps with, well, it must be me. It must be, why wouldn't he want to have anything to do with me? It must be because there's something about me that made him leave. And of course, I know, as an adult now, that that's not true. But as a child, those must have been tormenting thoughts.
Yeah, and sadly, these tormenting thoughts still creep up sometimes.
The
And
enough,
that,
am I
and
enough?
yeah, and that has really played a big part in when crisis situations have happened in my life. It's brought me back to my child wounds, or my core wounds as a child. It's like I kind of, you go back to feeling worthless and you're not enough and there's something wrong with you. It's like it goes back. So therapy has played a massive part in helping me to, heal. And
Hmm.
also in my Christian walk as well, which we can talk about as we continue, Joanna.
Thank you, Natalia. I mean, therapy, as you said, play a significant role in helping you to quieten those thoughts, for you to reframe the negative thoughts. But what was it like for the teenager? She never had therapy. She didn't have the understanding that you have and the skills and the tools that you have now that you can use when things happen, when crises happen, as you say, and you're dealing with the am I good enough thoughts. What was it like for you as a teenager managing those?
As a teenager, managing those feelings, I feel like I hid it a lot in laughing and comedy. So I think I've shared with you before, Joanna, that I used to do stand up comedy, and I'd be like the joker in the family and the one that's always laughing and quite impulsive and hyperactive. So I would use all of that um, to kind of like hide behind how I really was feeling. And when I would make jokes and, have a laugh with my family and with people, I would receive love. I'd receive self worth. I'd feel like I am good enough. Because a skill of mine, what God gave to me, is I'm very good at engaging with people. And I like to empathize with people and imagine life from their world. So I guess the comedy was a way of masking my emotions. But sadly, when you're not in the mood to be laughing and when you're not in that place of being hyper, and when you take some of these things away, like with the comedy and with the laughter, that's where the smoking was in there too, because that was a social thing. So I would smoke weed and get high and laugh as a teenager in my late teens. I did. And that was my way of dealing with stuff. But now, as an adult who's no longer smoking, who is more in touch with my feelings, it's harder to deal with because there's no coping, that there wasn't any coping strategy in place. There wasn't anything to kind of numb the pain. So as a teen, it wasn't easy. It was very up and down, very up and down.
It was up and down. You found something that worked. The comedy helped you laugh, helped others laugh. It gave you a sense of acceptance, and the smoking helps you, as opposed to numb. And as an adult, you're not using any of those tools. You're wanting to use healthier tools. How much harder it is to use healthy coping strategies than it is to use the ones that you were using before. And we do know that over the long term, the healthier ones are the better ones. But how difficult was it to make the transition?
Very difficult. Very, very difficult. I would say it's a burning feeling. Burning. It's still been a journey. I'm going to be honest with you. It's a journey every day. Every day is a journey of choosing which is good and denying which is bad. So it's I have to be at a place of just being very conscious of my mental health, because I really didn't understand how serious it was of in your childhood, how you're raised, how you are conditioned to, even like with your beliefs. So with your religion, or with how you problem solve, your resilience, all these things have all played a big part in how I deal with problem solving and how I deal with things that don't go right in life. So, like I said, it's a journey. So I have healthy habits in place. Like I'm mindful of what I watch. I'm mindful of what I do. So I've used exercise as a way of taking care of myself and having healthier habits, feeding back into people. So engaging with people, being in counseling, listening to people's problems, helping them. That helps me. That waters me. So yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly what your question was now. Sorry, Joanna.
Just the just the transition from the coping strategies as to use, the humor, the drawing attention, I suppose, to yourself, the things that you do for people to like you, and the smoking, transitioning from that to healthier coping strategies, like choosing to exercise versus smoking, choosing to sit in the sadness versus using comedy to distract yourself and those around you. And just how difficult is it to choose healthy coping strategies day by day?
I do think with having my husband, he does help me. He holds me accountable. So by where I live now, I don't live in the same place where I used to live. So where I used to live, I've got old friends that still smoke. It was accessible to, you know, get my fix or whatever you want to call it. It was easier in the environment that I was in. In my family, there's a smoking culture there. It's easy to get hold of these things, but by me physically moving to a different location, it's a more rural, or more like a village. By living in a village, these things aren't, even if I wanted to, it's not easy. So I've made it harder for myself, which is good. And my partner, well, my husband, who prays for me and helps me, that is what has helped me to transition over time by God's grace, slowly, and just being honest with God. There's been times where I've been smoking and then I've stopped and God's helped me, and then I've smoked again and then God's brought me back. And it has been a while now by God's grace. but I cannot boast in my own strength at all. But yeah, those things, moving away, having an accountable partner, and having faith and just taking one day at a time. That's what's kind of helped me.
I love the fact that you have support and that you have accountability in your partner, in your husband, and how he stands there. And I don't know, as you were talking, I saw the the parallels. Like, you didn't have a father who was present and who was there, but you have a husband who is present and who is there. Is that helping with your healing in any way? Is that helping heal little Natalya, or does it help?
Do you know what? This feels like a real conversation. And even that in itself, having the self-awareness that I have to check myself with that, because I don't want to fall into a situation of he's my dad and I'm a child.
No.
It isn't like that. But I've found myself in the past, earlier in our marriage, I would find myself kind of expecting him to. It's like you're looking for your father in your relationships.
Yeah.
I've realized that. So even in my teen years, like with little silly relationships I had there, you're just always kind of looking for your dad in your partner. But with my husband now, when I see how he is with the children, it's a blessing. It's nice to see how loving and protective he is with them. And he has been very protective with me because he hates smoking and he knows how bad it is. And it has helped me. But in the past, I've been angry. I've been like, leave me alone. This is my choice. You know, if anyone's ever dealt with addiction, it's not a case of, I want to do this. It's a case of I'm addicted to doing this. And this is another thing as well, Joanna, like in the church, we need to understand how addiction works and how we can really help people and how we can
Yeah.
understand addiction. Even when you love God, being an addict, it's between a rock and a hard place.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so having him around, it's been good, but it's been challenging too, because sometimes it's like just back off, leave me alone. And if you read that book as well, the book that we wrote, the devotional "Come See a Man," I
Yeah.
do speak a lot on that as well, with the dynamics with my husband and my previous addiction.
I'm so glad that you shared that, because there's so much in what you say that I didn't have a father. I was looking for a father figure. And even though he's not a father figure in the sense that he's not older or anything like that, in that sense, that much older, or I don't even know if he's older, but the dynamics can easily become what we never had, because that's what the pattern is, isn't it? And even though you didn't have an example of what a father was, or who he should be, I'm sure it would have been so easy for those dynamics to creep into your relationship, and it shifts from two adults that are married and are trying to work things out and manage their communication and manage their conflict, to you become the child and he become the parent, and you guys might have taken ages to
Yes.
resolve those patterns and have
Hmm.
a healthy marriage with two adults.
Yeah, and that is a thing. It is. And if you're not aware of it, you will
Yes.
slide into it. And I was noticing this is where when I was in therapy as well, I realized I'm having expectations of him being like my therapist, him being like my best friend, being my dad, being my husband. And it's like you have to be realistic and just understand that he's your husband. That's his role. He's not your therapist. He's not your dad. He's not your best friend. And this is why I feel like community is key as well. You need to have different people in your life that can help you to, just have a fulfilling, happy life. But when you can, sometimes when you isolate yourself or you get into that mindset of, I'm not enough, Nobody cares about me. You know, going back to those core wounds of being a child,
Yeah.
you can end up slipping into that sort of mindset as well, and just kind of just isolating yourself from people.
Yeah. Two things I hear: having a community with the different people in that community would be helpful to somebody who's navigating life without a father figure. And also being aware of your core wounds and have strategies to address them when triggered is really important. Otherwise, it could cause conflict in your relationship where when there is an expectation, because when you're triggered, and little Natalia, those wounds of not enoughness are triggered, they could spill over into your marriage and create an environment, and that's not what you wanted at all. That's not what either one of you wanted.
No, and that can be a lot of the reasons why people break up as well. You become
Yes.
too overbearing because you haven't dealt with these issues that have been swept under the carpet. So it's nice to be aware and to have self-awareness. It's a gift, but it's like once you understand, what are you going to do with that? And that is where counseling and prayer have become vital in my life when I need it.
Yeah.
If
What would
that
you
is
say?
that making sense?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, what would you say to someone who didn't have their father growing up, even for a time?
hmm
Because we know that it would create core wounds for everybody. So this person is a Christian. Let's talk to somebody who is a Christian. Speak to the woman who is a Christian. She is devout Christian. She didn't have her father, whether throughout her life or for a period. How could she identify the core wounds and that they're playing out in her relationship? What would be a sign for her that this is where not having my father for these years or not having my father at all is showing up? How could she identify it if she doesn't know what it looks like? What would be a sign? What would tell her that there it is?
That is a very good question. I would say with your needs, like what are your needs? Like when you're at rock bottom, what do you need? And I've noticed for me, it will look different on different people, but when I'm at rock bottom, I need a hug and I need to be told that it's going to be okay. And sadly, when I don't get that, I go back into child Natalia, um, where you're not feeling, where you feel vulnerable
Yeah.
and where you start to try and maybe you might end up, when you're vulnerable, you might react in a different way. You might get angry or feel as though just leave me alone. I'll deal with it myself. And you might become, what's the word, Joanna? You know, where you shut people out, where you
Isolated,
isolate.
independent.
Yeah, you might do that. It could show up, I think, as a mother as well. When you become a mother,
Mm.
I feel like just seeing your children, like raising your children, can really it takes you back to your childhood. I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
really trying to really grip your answer and give you grip your question and give you a good answer, but
Because the wounds of abandonment show up different for different people. You are really aware of yours. You said, I used comedy when I was younger. I smoked as an adult. I understand it. I know when I need a hug. I know I can choose exercise versus smoking. We've moved myself out of the environment, so I no longer have accessibility to some of the maladaptive coping strategies that I use, and so now I learn how to sit with it. I know when it's there and I know what to do. There's so many people who don't understand the wound, and so they're living and working and having relationships with the wound just playing out all over. their marriage or all over their relationships, their parenting, but they're not able to identify that this period without my father created significant wounds in me that I need to address. And because they might be using coping strategies that, though they're good, they are
Mm-hmm.
not healing, you know?
I think as well, it just watch yourself with when you are vulnerable. Do you allow yourself to be vulnerable?
That's a good one.
And if you do allow yourself to be vulnerable, how does that feel? How do you sit with that? How is that okay? Are you scared? Are you not gonna be vulnerable? A lot of people, they won't allow themselves to be vulnerable, because when you allow yourself to be vulnerable, that is when you really look in the mirror and see what is actually there, what is
Mm,
looking you back in the face.
That is
And
so true.
yeah, and for me, being vulnerable has made me really understand, like, why do I feel like this? How do I not feel like this anymore?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think your honesty is so refreshing on this issue because, as I said, people are always aware of what's going on. They use coping strategies that look good, but of course, it's still as maladaptive as smoking was. It's still covering something. Um, let's look at the broader perspective. How has this influenced your work, your ability to be as in touch with your feelings, with an understanding of yourself and of the impact of an absent father? How has this impacted your work?
So I feel as though it's impacted my work, because this is what has drove me to even be in this field of counseling.
Mm,
So, like I said, as a child, I was very aware as a child. So, noticing what life was like for my mum, not having a man in the house, noticing what it was like for my mum to work and to provide for us and to not have that security of a man, and how she dealt with that, and
mm,
even how she deals with her own wounds as a child. Just from a young child, I just feel as though, like, I knew too much as a child, and that has fed into me growing up and kind of like just caring about people. I always thought about people's feelings, and I don't know if it's because I was very in touch with my own feelings. I just
yeah.
felt sorry for other people. And then as I continued to grow, I did hairdressing. So I'd enjoy speaking to people, and you'd be doing the hair and helping them to feel good and listening to their problems. And then I realized, you know what? I want more. I enjoy making women look good, but I feel like I want more. So then I
Mm,
went into counseling. And then once I went into counseling, it was like, wow, this is me.
yeah.
This is me. This is what I'm here for. And it was a place where I didn't feel dumb or inadequate. I felt like, yeah, this is my thing. I understand this. And just sitting down and listening to people and hearing their stories and just seeing them as children, that's I just look at people as children that are grown. So that child has
Absolutely.
a story. Yeah. And yeah, that it's impacted my work. I feel like it's sad, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but I see the blessing and the seasoning in my experience that has given me this flavor as a counselor now.
Yeah.
And because I am so open, it can be surprising to people, but it helps people to feel more comfortable, because they're
Yeah.
thinking, okay, well, I guess you are who you are, so I guess I can kind of, be who I am. And then that is when the work can begin, because
Yeah.
then you're okay to feel vulnerable. It's all right.
Yeah, it is. That's beautiful. You mentioned your faith a lot, Natalia, and I know you've mentioned a little bits as we've been having the conversation. How has your faith helped you to navigate the challenges of abandonment?
Do you know what? Can I be honest again, Joanna?
Of course.
So yesterday, I had a really, it was strange because the day before yesterday, on Sunday, I was talking to people about their mental health like I did. It was at a health event. And I spoke about hair and I spoke about mental health and counseling. And I was on a high. I was literally on a high. And then on the Monday morning, I woke up and the house was a mess. And there was so much stuff to do with the children. And I don't know, it's like depression just kind of like just broke into my home. It's like I don't know what came over me, but I just felt really, really, really down for some reason. And I've noticed that it just comes as an unwanted guest.
Mm.
Like I just but I know what the trigger was. I think it's because the house was such a mess. It made me feel as though my home was just like my world was just crashing down on me.
Mm.
So when I felt really, really depressed, I went back into little Natalya again, and it was like, oh, you're worthless.
Those core
You,
wounds.
yeah, you're no good. Look, you're upset, and nobody's noticed. Nobody cares.
Oh.
And I was in that place, and then I was thinking, do you know what? Even with God, God don't really care about me. He doesn't. Like these were the thoughts that was coming to my head. He doesn't really care about you. You haven't reached a certain spiritual level yet, so
Mm.
you haven't been doing what you should have been doing. All these horrible thoughts came to my head, and you know what I did? I started planning in my head some terrible things that I'm not even going to say, but I know that these things were from the enemy, but it was seriously a spiritual attack yesterday. But I decided that I was just going to go and cry. I went
Mm.
and cried, and I was literally crying to God. And I said, God, like, it really does feel like you don't care. It feels like you're not here. I said, Lord, please, can you hug me? Like, I actually need a hug. I really need a hug right now. Please hug me. And I said, I know I've got this, and this that I haven't overcome yet, but please, like you say, you invited me. You invite me. You say, those who are burdened and heavy laden, come and I will give you rest. You've invited me to rest. So please give me some rest. Like, just help me. Why am I so up and down? And I just was crying. And then I walked off, got some tissue. I went back and I cried again. And then I walked off and I went back and I cried again. And then something told me to go and look up the word fatherless.
Mm.
So I started going through all the Bible scriptures with fatherless, 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 fatherless. And God really cares about the fatherless
He
a
does.
lot. He puts them on the same level as the needy and the widows. And God, he says that the true, pure religion is those who will go and visit the fatherless. And you know, many times with my core wounds, it's like
Mhm.
nobody cares, you're not
Yes.
good enough, nobody loves you. But God is actually saying, like, to be a proper Christian is someone to go and visit the fatherless. That means having
You.
community with the fatherless,
Yes.
being there.
Yes.
And I thought, oh wow, okay, like, all right, God really does care. And then I looked up what the word fatherless actually means in the Strong Concordance. And do you know what it means?
What?
It means orphan, and it means lonely, and it means
Wow.
bereaved. And we all know
Whoa.
what it's like to, well, some of us know
It's
what it's like for grief.
it's a grief because it's a loss, isn't it?
Yeah. And the loneliness, Joanna, of like the
Mm.
isolation of feeling like nobody cares. It was like, wow, okay, so he knows. And then one more thing, affliction. God talks about affliction a lot to do with the fatherless. And when I looked at what the word affliction meant, do you know what that means? That means depression.
Wow.
And I was thinking, oh my gosh, like sometimes, sadly, you can speak with your Christian friends and they're like, Christians shouldn't be depressed and you shouldn't be sackcloth and ashes and you should be praising the Lord and this and that. And God is literally saying he comes to help the afflicted. He cares
Mm.
about the afflicted. We're supposed to be there for the afflicted. And that is people who are suffering with depression. And I was like, wow, Lord, thank you. You spoke to me. Thank you so much. And I just felt a hug in the word.
Wow. I hear you. You went in a place and you came out on the other side. And I said, how did your faith help you? And you said, I mean, the trigger was a home that you felt was untidy. And that triggered core wounds. So, for those who are listening, they can see how sometimes various things can trigger those core wounds. An untidy home triggered those core wounds of nobody see me. You go and cry to God, and He showed you how He sees you.
Let me add another bit, Joe. With the house being a mess, this is a bit that I've missed out. That makes me feel angry as well. So I start getting mad and saying, why is the place a mess? Why is nobody not helping me? Nobody cares. Everyone thinks I'm a slave. Like, no, and then it's like, and then you feel terrible because you've been horrible. You're not being warm. You're not being nurturing. You're just being just a dinosaur in the house on everyone. Sorry. But yeah, I just needed to add that bit in too. So it's like it went into guilt as well.
Well, I can imagine. And then it went into nobody sees me, and going to cry to God and asking for a hug. And He sent you to those passages that He's saying, I see you. I see you. You said nobody see you, but I see you. And this is what I say about you. And I think that is so beautiful. But there's something that you said that was going to, my next question was going to be, how can the church help? And you said, well, the Bible said that we should visit the fatherless and we should look after the afflicted. And so that's how the church community can help. Have you experienced community in that sense? Or you form communities to help people? How does it work for you? Have you ever experienced that kind of community where people are mindful, like, look, there's some fatherless here. We're going to love them and we're going to show them the love of Christ because that's what we're called to do.
I'm so sorry to say this, but I have not experienced that. I haven't. I have not. And luckily, I did manage to sit down with a pastor recently who's actually a good friend of ours. He doesn't go to a church anywhere near us, but I started opening up to him and I said to him, I feel like the pastors just don't really care. I feel like the elders don't care. I feel like people are just in such a rush. They've got so many other churches to deal with. Like, they just don't really, I feel as though they don't care. I haven't experienced that. And he did explain the logistics to me, saying sometimes he's got 400 people that he manages in 4 churches.
Wow.
And it's a lot. They're under a lot of pressure as well, So I thought, you know what? Okay, that's understandable. But I think the way that the church can help is mainly it's about you. It's what can you do to help? Because I'm at a point now, Joanna, where if I keep looking to the church and finding like fault with what they're not doing and how they don't care, it doesn't help with my core wound.
No.
So I've realized as well when I was reading last night that for us to help the fatherless or help the widow or help the needy or help the afflicted, we are doing that to Christ. And God really values that so much. And there's such a blessing in that. Like, those are the people that really are going to make it to heaven. And if Christ was here, that is how he would be. So if we look to him in what he would do and what he expects, then we can make a difference,
Absolutely.
Sometimes just one person can make a massive difference to somebody's life. So even today,
Yes.
when you asked me to come and speak on here, I was thinking this is not the right time. I literally had a little mini breakdown yesterday, but when I read those passages last night, and I read about to help people who were afflicted and to be there for them and to show them compassion and to listen to them, this is a blessing for me to come and do this, to come and share, because this is what God has called me to do. I come to share my testimony and to just bring light to the need of talking and the need of listening. people are in such a rush. Nobody has time to listen.
Mhm.
And
That's
that's where the
true.
cold wound comes in, because it's like, well, if you don't have time to listen, that means that you don't care. That's how my brain takes it in. So it's like, I have time to listen because I care.
Because you've been heard, because you've been comforted. And this is what the wounded healer looks like. The wounded healer is not able to heal someone because they've been wounded. It's because they've been wounded and got healed, so that we can heal when we've been healed. So you've been comforted by Christ, so you know what that feels like. And so you can help comfort somebody else because of the comfort that you got. And that's what he said, isn't it?
Amen.
I am passionate about the trauma informed church. I am passionate about churches becoming safe spaces. That's a forever campaign of mine. And I have a training on in August around that, because I believe that we can be accessible to the Holy Spirit, so that we can learn to hear and we can see. He can send me to you without me knowing your story and say, go comfort Natalya, or
Mm-hmm.
go comfort somebody else, because I'm open to it. But as you said, we're so busy. We have so much going on in our own lives. We have so much going on that we have put on our plate, not
Mm-hmm.
what should be on our plate. And so we don't have a lot of capacity to help other people. But I believe that if we're not safe spaces as churches, we're going to lose a lot of people for Christ when we're not learning how to comfort the fatherless, how to visit the widow, and how
Mm-hmm.
to help the afflicted. We're not everybody's a counselor to manage your core wound, but everybody can see somebody. And I'm passionate about helping churches to train in churches and on how to do that, how to do
Yeah,
that.
we
Passion-
need that, Joe. And like you say, not everyone's a counselor, but sometimes it could just be a case of just someone just saying, you know what, when someone says, Happy Sabbath, are you okay? If somebody actually said, no, I'm not, I'm fed up. Like,
But I don't
what
think
do
people
you do with that?
stop long enough to hear the answer to that question.
No,
It's like, how are you? And they're gone. You've answered
that's
yet.
not what it is. So I
Yeah,
think it's just about being intentional and really asking God to help you to actually care about people, to care.
absolutely.
Because if you care, that's a good way to start. God
Yes.
can do the rest. But
Yes.
yeah, hopefully, just by you spreading the word and just trying to live by example, it can be contagious. That's my
It,
prayer.
it absolutely can. Thank you, Natalia, for sharing, your story so honestly. What message would you give to a young person navigating the pain of not having a father? What would you say to them?
I would say to them, first off, I'm really sorry that you don't have your dad. It's not nice and it's not your fault. You didn't ask to be born, and God has a purpose in your life, regardless. And by God's grace, if you ever have children, you have the power to be that dad that will be there for your children. Or if you're a woman and you're going to pick your husband or the father of your child, you have the power to pick better for your children and for the next generation. And another thing that I would say is learn how to access your Father in heaven that will never ever leave you, and be gentle and loving towards yourself. Don't beat yourself up, and try your best to not self harm. So when I say self harm can be looking like smoking weed. It can be looking like getting into terrible relationships. It can look like cutting yourself, of course, or drinking alcohol. Try your best to really appreciate and take care of the body that God gave you and the mind that God gave you, because He wants your mind and He cares about your mind. So just try not to abuse that, because sadly that is what I did. I did abuse that, and it's taken a long time to undo those bad habits that I had. So, yeah, make use of the people in your life that do care about you, that do love you, because there will be people there. And don't listen to the words of what the enemy says when he says that you're not enough. You are enough. You're more than enough.
More than enough. Tell us, thank you for that message to a young person who might be navigating that period in their lives right now. And I think it's applicable even if you're not a young person, you're older, and you had to live with an absent father, whether it was physical absence or emotional absence, it would still trigger those core wounds. It would still cause those core wounds. And so Natalya's message is applicable for you at whatever stage you are navigating that. A few things, Natalya. Tell us about a little bit more about Natalya other than that. Like you're a counselor. You said some of what led you to make the decision to be a counselor was that you saw your mother, you liked talking to people, you discovered counseling, you thought, whoa, this is me. What else do you do? What are some of the hobbies that you have that helped you in just not only your counseling but just your life? What do you do?
So, what do I do? I do a lot of things. Do a lot, but I would say having a creative outlet has helped me as well. So I like to help women with their self-esteem and with their natural hair. So that's a skill that God gave to me that's helped me to really love who I am and love my identity. So I enjoy speaking to women and men about self-worth and taking care of themselves and taking care of the hair that God gave to them. Yeah, so that's one thing that I do, that I enjoy doing. The other thing is just bringing awareness on these sort of subjects like what we're talking about today. So just sharing my experience and educating people to know that it's okay for us to sit down and talk. So I'm really, really passionate about like just the family, healthy families, happy families, open families, not sweeping stuff underneath the carpet. I love having challenging conversations that will make people think and make them really like look into stuff. And even when I was younger as well, Joanna, like my family would always say, "You're so emotional. You're so emotional." But I think how I take that now is I was just so, I don't know, so open, so raw, so congruent, just so honest. That's the way how I would look at it. So
Yeah.
I love engaging with people, whether it's about hair, whether it's about mental health, whether it's about family life, motherhood, just speaking with people. That's
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
that's my
Well,
thing.
motherhood, and I've seen you with your babies and they're fun. I love looking at your stories and your status when they're singing, because I remember those stages in my own parenting when they used to make up songs that never ends, and it just is such a joy. It's such a joy. Natalya, you mentioned the book project that you took part in, that you shared your stories, more of her story in how she interacted with the depression and some of the coping strategies that she used. If you want to know more about Natalya, where can people find you to learn more about you and to connect with you?
If you would like to know more about me, you can connect with me on Instagram. It is Christ Therapy. You can go to my website, which is www.christtherapy.com, or you can find me on Facebook. My name is Natalya Unique on there. And I'll be more than happy to touch base and talk. And yeah.
Right. Awesome. I mean, Natalya and I like to have these conversations, so we could be here for a while. But thank you so much, Natalya, for coming to share with our community around just the impact, some of the impact anyway. Give us just a glimpse into what it looks like when you're navigating and healing from the absent father. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us in this episode of Stories That Shape Us. I hope you'll join us on the next story.